Assalamu alaikum, dear students of class first year. Today we are going to start a new chapter number 4, that is liquid. We have already explained the properties of gaseous, solids and the liquids. Now come to the chapter 4, where there is a chapter number 4, where there is a type of forces present between the molecules. What are the intermolecular forces? Inter means between. The forces existed between the molecules. There are two types of the forces. These are the forces that is existed, that is produced when the molecules in the container come close to each other. And there are some other type of forces. These are the chemical forces, just like a covalent bond. A new bond is formed, that is the strongest forces. But these intermolecular forces are the weak forces. How do you explain? These are the forces when the molecules come close to each other. There are the attractive forces between the molecule is developed. For example, one molecule of HCl, which is already bonded with a covalent bond that is present between the H and Cl, to create one molecule with a covalent bond, HCl. When the one molecule of HCl come close to each other, another molecule of HCl, and due to coming close to each other, a new forces are developed, that is called as the intermolecular forces. Inter means between the two molecules that produced when they come close to each other. Another type of forces are intra. What is the difference between the intermolecular forces and the intramolecular forces? Intra means the molecule which has the atoms, and the forces exist between the atoms of one molecule. You can say the forces within molecule is called as the intra, and the forces between the two molecules is called as the intermolecular forces. Now next is the types of intermolecular forces. There are 4 types of intermolecular forces. Here dipole forces, dipole-induced dipole forces, London forces. Number 4 is hydrogen bonding. Now we are going to, I am going to explain all these types of the forces one by one. Number 1 forces is the dipole forces. What is the dipole? Dipole means two poles. Di means two poles. How? Look at this HCl molecule, HCl. Two poles are there. One pole is negative pole, other pole is the positive pole. That is called as the dipole. Now question is how this dipole of HCl is created. This is the dipole because it has two poles. One pole is negative, other pole is the positive. So you can say this is the dipole. How? And this is called as the polarity. How this dipole is created? Due to this is produced, or a dipole or polarity is developed due to the difference of electronegativity. How is it explained? If the electronegativity of chlorine is 3.2, but the hydrogen electronegativity is 2.1, so there is a lot of difference. So what happened due to the difference? This chlorine, being a more electronegative element, attacks being a more electronegative, strong electronegative element, shifts the electron slightly towards itself. As a result of this, negative charge is created on this terminal. And here is the efficiency of electrons, and due to the shifting of electrons towards the chloride, it carries the positive charge. So you can say how the dipole is created. Dipole is created due to the difference of electronegativity, and a polar bond is formed. This molecule is called as the polar molecule because it has the two poles, because it has the two terminals, because it has the two ends. One end that is negative, other end that is positive. Now go to next slide. Before going to next slide, here is that. Alright, so what is the dipole forces? When the one dipole, just like a HCl, come close to another dipole. Look at this. This is the HCl, this is the dipole, this is the permanent dipole. When the molecule of HCl come close to another molecule of HCl, the negative end of this molecule. So the negative end of this pole attracts the positive end of the pole, another positive end of the other molecule. So this type of the forces which are shown here as a dotted line is called as the intermolecular forces. These are the weak intermolecular forces because it is developed when the molecules coming close to each other. So why they are called as the dipole-dipole forces? Because dipole create the forces of attraction between another dipole. So this is called as the dipole-dipole forces. Dipole-dipole forces are very important. Now the next one is, look at this. Here is the dipole-dipole forces. One dipole attacks one end, attacks the other. One end attacks the other. As a result of this, dipole or intermolecular forces, dipole-dipole forces are created, which affects the physical properties. Melting point, boiling point is increasing due to the intermolecular forces. So this is called as the dipole-dipole. And now the second type of the dipole forces is called as the dipole-induced dipole forces. Last dipole-dipole forces is created between the polar molecules. Both the molecules are already polar due to the difference of electronegativity. But now another type of the intermolecular forces is called as the dipole-induced dipole. This forces is going to be produced between the polar molecule and the non-polar molecule. For example, here is this one is the polar molecule. This one is the polar molecule. It has the two ends. This is called as the dipole. And you can say it's a permanent dipole. And this dipole is created due to the difference of electronegativity. When come close to another molecule, that is the neutral molecule, that is the non-polar molecule's nucleus is in the center and electron is revolving around it. When the non-polar molecule come close to the polar molecule, what happens? You know, like charges repel each other and unlike charges attract to each other. For example, when the negative end of this dipole attacks when the negative end of this dipole come close to the polar molecule, come close to the electrons of the polar molecule, what happened? The repulsion created. These negative end repel the electron of non-polar molecules and repulsion is formed. Due to this repulsion, these electrons moves away at the one end, moves away towards the one end, and this end becomes the negative terminal, and opposite end where the electrons moves away, from where the electron moves away, carries the positive charge. So a dipole is created. This is the non-polar molecule. This is not a dipole. But how they are? Because due to the unequal distribution of electrons. How this unequal distribution is created? When the dipole, negative end of the dipole repel the electrons of non-polar molecules. Due to this repulsion, all the electrons rain away and collected at one side, and this side becomes the negative end and other side becomes the polar. So this is not a dipole, but dipole is created. Who is created this dipole? This permanent dipole. So how this created dipole, which is non-polar molecule, which is not dipole, but become dipole due to the other permanent dipole, it is called as the induced dipole. Now there are two dipoles. One is the permanent dipole, other is the induced dipole. Again, same as in the case of the dipole-dipole forces, one end, positive end attacks the negative end, and the negative end, the positive end, forces of attraction is developed. That is called as the dipole-induced dipole forces. So how do you explain this? One dipole or a one polar molecule come to the another non-polar molecule. So it forces the non-polar molecule to become the dipole. So this is called as the induced dipole, and the forces of attraction that is developed is called as the dipole-induced dipole forces. Third one is the van der Waals forces, London forces, you can say. This is another type of intermolecular forces. This is the weakest forces, right? This is also called as the instantaneous induced dipole forces. Another name is what? Instantaneous induced dipole forces. that is called as the instantaneous forces, that is called as the dispersion forces, that is called as the London, all are London forces is created. Very simple. These forces are created between the non-polar molecules. They are both the molecules are non-polar. For example, helium, neon, all are the non-polar molecules. What happened to the non-polar molecules? Look at this picture. These are the two non-polar molecules. There is no dipole at all. What happened when the one of the non-polar molecule at any instant come close to another non-polar molecule? What happened? Both, look at this, both the nucleus is in the center, electrons are revolving around the nucleus in both the non-polar molecules. At any instant, when they come close to each other, the electrons of one molecule repel the electron of another molecule. Due to this repulsion, a temporary dipole is created. What happened? A temporary dipole is created because these electrons moves away to another side and create a positive end, other negative end, and the electrons from where it moves away, rains away, is called as the positive end. So for the time being, at any instant, a dipole is created. This dipole is called as the instantaneous dipole because it creates at any instant lot of number of non-polar molecules are present in the container. So due to the repulsion, due to when they are coming close to each other, a repulsion between the electrons is created. As a result of this repulsion, instantaneous, you can say this temporary dipole, you can say instantaneous dipole because it is created at any instant between the molecules. So this is called as the instantaneous dipole. When this instantaneous dipole, as same as we have discussed in the dipole, induced dipole, this instantaneous or temporary dipole comes close to another non-polar molecule, it induces the polarity on the other molecule. Same as in the case of dipole-induced dipole. So this is another molecule, is the non-polar molecules. This instantaneous dipole repel the electrons of the non-polar molecules and another dipole is created. This another dipole is called as the induced dipole because polarity is induced, the instantaneous dipole. Now there are two dipoles. One dipole is called as the instantaneous dipole, temporary dipole. Another dipole is called as the induced dipole. So when these two dipoles come close to each other, they are orientated. How they are orientated? Negative end attacks the positive end, positive end attacks the negative end, just like that. Now how they are orientated, the negative end attacks the positive end of the molecule. And this type of intermolecular forces is called as the dipole-induced dipole forces. Instantaneous and the induced dipole forces. There are another two dipoles. One dipole is called as the instantaneous. Other dipole is called as the what do you say? Induced dipole. So the forces of attraction, forces of intermolecular forces that is present between the instantaneous dipole and the induced dipole is called as the London forces or the temporary. This is a weakest, or there are four types of intermolecular forces. The London forces or instantaneous dipole forces are the weakest forces among them. Weakest forces because when they move away from each other, these forces is vanished. When they moves away from each other, it created at any instant. It moves away, it finished at any instant. When they away from each other, this London forces is disappeared. Right? This is all about the, you can say, this is we have discussed the three forces of intermolecular forces. In next lecture, I will tell you the factors affecting the London forces, factors affecting the London forces. Number second point, hydrogen bonding and the application of hydrogen bonding. Thank you so much.